Type 2 Diabetes in the RGV by Gael Gonzalez, Jaime Lopez, Carlos Nava, and Francisco Montañez. What is diabetes? Diabetes is a health condition that affects how your body turns food into energy. Diabetes may reduce the amount of insulin your body produces. Diabetes may also affect how your body uses the insulin produced. Type 2 diabetes. With this type of diabetes, your body is unable to use insulin well, and your sugar levels are unstable and aren't at normal rates. This type of diabetes is also the most common type, with 90 and 95% of individuals with diabetes having type 2. What may cause type 2 diabetes? The main factor that may cause diabetes is the amount of physical activity someone has and healthy habits. Someone overweight or obese has a higher risk of developing diabetes type 2. It has to do with insulin resistance. If your body has too much fat, it is going to be harder for your liver or pancreas to produce enough insulin so that the glucose can proceed to go in the cells. If the liver is overworked, your body will overload with blood glucose. Symptoms of type 2 diabetes. Symptoms may take some time to be presented when you have type 2 diabetes. You can have the disease without any symptoms until suddenly they will be presented slowly. A list of examples of symptoms are being thirsty frequently, frequent urination, increase in appetite, unintended weight loss, fatigue, blurred vision, slow healing process, frequent infections, numbness or tickling in hands or feet, and areas of darkened skin, usually armpits and neck. Type 2 diabetes in the RGV. The Rio Grande Valley of South Texas has an estimated total rate of 27% of diabetes. This number is almost 3 times as high as the rest of the population in the United States, with the rest of the state of Texas as a whole having an overall percentage of 15.9 obesity rate and a 20.3% obesity rate in children ages 10 through 17. A local RGV study focused on kids has shown that local diabetes is mainly caused because of an unhealthy diet, food insecurity, which have both been tied with obesity. However, there was no mention of local children obesity rate. We just know that the number is on the rise. In more recent news, COVID-19 has been used as another factor for increasing rates of diabetes within the RGV, as children are spending more time indoors and are limiting physical activities. Type 2 diabetes in Texas. During 2017, the state of Texas as a whole had an estimated 2,323,220 individuals with diabetes. 11.4% of the adult population within the state had diabetes, and approximately 23.8% of people with diabetes weren't aware of it. In the state of Texas, the youth ages 10 through 17 have a rate obesity of 20.3%, which is higher in comparison to the adult obesity rate. Children are shown to be at higher risk of type 2 diabetes, with factors such as being overweight, obese, family history, or being inactive, with some ethnicity groups at a higher risk other than such as African Americans, Hispanic, Native American, Native Alaskan, Asian American, and Pacific Islander. Although not particular to Texas, it is said that type 2 diabetes is more likely to develop if you aren't physically active or are overweight or obese. Type 2 diabetes in the United States. The United States is one of the nations with the highest percentage of obesity out of all nations worldwide. 1 out of 10 people are diagnosed with diabetes, and go to 95% are most likely to have type 2 diabetes, making it the most common form of diabetes. Over a third of the United States population is pre-diabetic. However, around 84% of them are unaware of this. The national level is about 34 million on the US. The age range of this disease is more common in older people around 40 and older. However, Children and teenagers diagnosed with diabetes may be inherited or are the consequences of an awful diet habit. What may cause genetic type 2 diabetes? You're more likely to develop the condition if a parent or sibling has it. Several gene mutations have been linked to the development of type 2 diabetes. These gene mutations can interact with the environment and each other to further increase your risk. People who develop genetic type 2 diabetes first have insulin resistance, a condition in which the body cells use insulin less efficiently than normal. As insulin resistance develops, more and more insulin is needed to keep blood sugars in the level normal range. Some of these factors, like your family history, can't be changed. Type 2 diabetes can be inherited and is linked to your family history and genetics, but environmental factors also play a role. Not everyone with a family history of type 2 diabetes will get it, but you're more likely to develop it if a parent or sibling has it. You're at an increased risk of having type 2 diabetes if you have multiple gene mutations associated with type 2 diabetes, have a family member of diabetes, have been diagnosed with high blood pressure, are age 45 years old older. Insulin resistance is the most common cause of type 2 diabetes, but you can have a form of type 2 diabetes where your body simply doesn't produce enough insulin. What may cause non-genetic type 2 diabetes? There are a number of non-genetic factors mentioned in different studies that are associated with type 2 diabetes. These factors range from lifestyle, food, and its components, persistent organic pollutants, as well as the gut ecosystem. Some of these factors also lead directly or indirectly to obesity and oxidative stress, which are also known to be directly linked to type 2 diabetes. Despite having a few conflicting results, behaviors such as alcohol intake, smoking, exercises, and sedentariness have been known to be associated with type 2 diabetes for decades. However, other factors such as stress, insomnia, and the use of certain clinical drugs such as antibiotics have emerged and found to be associated with diseases in recent years. Non-genetic cases of type 2 diabetes. According to Omar Ali, Genetics of Type 2 Diabetes, World Journal of Diabetes, the detailed genetic architecture of type 2 diabetes risk has not yet been precisely defined. A relatively small percentage of non-autoimmune diabetes is due to monogenic causes and is classified as monogenic diabetes of the young, or MODY. These cases are understood to be caused by single genes of high penetrance, of which mutations of the hepatocyte nuclear factor 1A and the gluconase gene are the most common. These forms of diabetes are sometimes misdiagnosed as type 2 diabetes, but clinically they are distinct diseases. They will not be considered further in this review, but should be kept in mind that the boundaries between polygenic and monogenic forms are not always sharply defined in the genetic level. Polymorphisms in genes involved in monogenic forms of diabetes also play a role in polygenic type 2 diabetes. Genetic cases of type 2 diabetes. According to Omar Ali, Genetics of Type 2 Diabetes, World Journal of Diabetes, linkage is the tendency for genes and other genetic markers to be inherited together because of their location near one another on the same chromosome. While linkage analysis is simple in principle, it has relatively poor resolution, as only a few hundred markers were usually genotyped across the genome, and the regions identified by linkage could include millions of base pairs and hundreds of genes. While these methods were quite successful in detecting rare variants of large effect classical single unit disorders, they proved relatively unsuccessful in identifying genes that are involved in complex polygenic disorders. These studies only revealed two genes, Caplane 10 and transaction factor 7 like 2, that were reliably identified as being associated with type 2 diabetes. YouTube video and key points. It starts out because some of your tissues, like muscle, liver, and the adipose tissue that are not responsive to the insulin, And so the beta cells of the pancreas, the cells that secrete the insulin, secrete more to make up for their insensitivity to the normal amount of insulin, so your beta cells make extra insulin that brings your glucose back down again, but it's really producing more insulin than it normally should. Typically, that's what we would call a pre-diabetic. Now what happens is that with time the beta cells kind of give up. They can't keep making enough insulin because of the resistance of the muscle, and the liver and other tissue gets worse and worse with time. Eventually the pancreas says, I can't do this anymore, I'm stopping, and it stops making insulin. And that's when you become what we call a frank type 2 diabetic, because now you have very little insulin secretion and you got to take insulin now, even as a type 2. Type 2 diabetic facts. In the United States, diabetes is currently the 7th leading cause of death. Over a third of the United States population is pre-diabetic, and more than 84% of them are now aware of it. Type 2 diabetes makes up about 90 to 95% of all diabetic cases, making it the most common form of diabetes. Over the last 20 years, the amount of Americans suffering from diabetes has doubled, as aging has led to the population to become more overweight and obese. Type 2 diabetes is a condition that's created when glucose levels build up in your bloodstream. It's a common condition that's often triggered by certain lifestyle choices, but the likelihood of diagnosis can be increased by genetics, age, and heritage. Type 2 diabetes can be managed and even reversed with certain lifestyle changes. For more severe cases, medication is available. If you've been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, talk to your doctor about developing a treatment plan that works for your lifestyle, because this condition is so common that a plethora of resources and first-person accounts to help you. If you've been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, talk with your doctor about developing a treatment plan that works for your lifestyle. Because this condition is so common, there's a plethora of resources and first-person accounts to help you on your journey towards managing or breaking free from type 2 diabetes.